I am Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, recorded on January 15th, 2015. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths Finder themes, one theme at a time, and today's theme is input. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during the webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you. We'd love to have you log into that as well. You can create a guest account or log in with any social media account that you have out there, Facebook, Yahoo, LinkedIn, Twitter, any of those. Google Plus will log you in if you want to do that as well. It's the best way to get questions into the program, and we like your questions, and we'd like you to post them as well. So log into chat if you could, and you can join us right there, right below the main video window. If you're listening to the recorded version of this, or you need or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, you can contact us via email, coaching@gallup.com. And don't forget to visit the Gallup Strength Center. That's just gallupstrengthcenter.com for all your coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video in both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening. And offline is key. Capture that time in your car. Listen to us on the way to work. That's a great way to recapture that time. All that's available, all the links you need to everything we do social here is at coaching.gallup.com. Super easy, coaching.gallup.com. Kurt Liesfeld is our host today. Kurt works as a senior learning and development consultant here with Gallup on the riverfront. I get to see him every day, and it's great to have you back, Kurt. We haven't done this in about 30 days. Welcome back to Theme Thursday.
Yeah, it's great to be back, to get back into the swing of things with regards to themes, and I'm excited today to have one of my learning and development colleagues, Stephen Shield from our D.C. office. He's there today, and he's going to be our theme poster. In fact, I think he is my theme poster child for input, having a chance to work with him. I think he may be one of the most well-read and quotable persons I've had a chance to work with, so I think that certainly reflects his input, but we'll hear from him a little bit later. I'm going to just kind of give you the overture to the theme of input here. The definition that I have if I kind of pull it all together and try to summarize it in a short definition, here's how I would put it. Input is an awareness and an acquisition of resources that have utility that can lead to productive resourcefulness. I think people who have input really see the value in stuff, and stuff can be all over the place in terms of what it is. It's obviously about information for many people. How people kind of consume that information can vary, I think, from person to person. I think traditionally, maybe a number of years ago, people with input would have been primarily about books, but I think that has expanded with the access to information that we have on the internet. So it's websites, it's apps. I think it can also be about tools. I have a brother-in-law has input. I think he may have every crafts tool created by craftsmen in his job. He's resourceful in that way. He kind of like gadgets too. He's kind of a gadget guy. I think there's a little bit of MacGyver in input as well, possibly. I think it can also be about tools and curriculum. I think part of the reason, a lot of people come to programs that I lead. I think a lot of people have input, and they are kind of intrigued and interested and want to kind of acquire the Strengths Finder as a tool. They really see its value as a tool, and I think that has a lot to do with input. Obviously, it's a strategic thinking theme, and I think these resources that people with input acquire, I think, have the potential to help them think about the world and about themselves in different ways and in productive ways. I think the metaphor that I often use with this theme is the metaphor of a sponge. And just like a sponge is absorbent, I think people with input absorb stuff, and they can be kind of selective, or sometimes they're not very selective depending on other themes that they have, but they absorb it. Now I tell people the purpose of a sponge is never to be a permanent container. In fact, when a sponge holds on to stuff a little bit too long, it starts to smell a bit. But really a sponge is really a dispenser, a transporter, if you will, from one place to another, and I think that's at the core of the core value, I think, of people with input is their resourcefulness. They are full of resources, and I think the best resources are the ones that, the people who have really maximized their input are people who have really been able to get the resources that that have the most utility, that help them, that help other people. And I've obviously seen this in Mr. Shields here. I think some nouns that go, and I think we could have better nouns. Some of these nouns don't capture the essence, these nouns and adjectives. I think we could have better ones. I'm just going to be honest here. Archivist, librarian, collector, absorber, curator, resourcer, circulator are all kind of words, nouns that could be used. Adjectives could be resourceful, collecting, inquisitive, utility aware, generous, well-read, investigative. Those would be kind of some words that I would use. In terms of the frequency of this particular theme, actually in our database, which is really kind of surprising to me, this is number 6 on the list in our database. 20% of our database of 11 million people have input in their top 5. And again, I think part of the reason is they are probably attracted to the Strengths Finder as a tool. They see the utility in this thing, and so they want to acquire it. They want to have it as a resource that they use for themselves and others. I mean, that's just my non-scientific explanation of that. The theme that is most likely paired with input is intellection. There's a kind of almost a 45% odds that if you have input, you will also have intellection high in your profile. And that makes some sense to me. They both are kind of strategic thinking themes. I think to some degree, I think input is a bit more kind of practical. It has a kind of an application side to it. And maybe that's what it adds to intellection. The theme that's most likely paired with self-assurance was a bit surprising to me, but as I thought about it, I think I can see why that might be. The theme that is least likely paired with input is self-assurance. Now, that's part of that's it's a statistical artifact of that because there's not much self-assurance in the profile, so there's just not that many. But to some degree, I think people who have self-assurance are primarily confident in themselves. And I think to some degree, the person with input also has some confidence in the resources that they've gathered, that they distribute. So that would just be one way to kind of explain that. In terms of other themes that could help to have an impact on impact, themes that might moderate or intensify input. Obviously, I think learner is a theme that kind of intensifies input. Both of them are kind of curious and inquisitive, and so if you take this kind of burning curiosity and this inquisitiveness of input and put those together, I think they really kind of feed. It's kind of like if you've got learner and input, it's like 1 + 1 = 3. I think to some degree intellectual. That theme that most likely goes with it. It says some of the most valuable resources will come from the powerful and productive reflection. I think that's part of maybe how people with input sort through their themes, how they come to understand the value of them. Some themes that really could maybe moderate or manage input a little bit might be discipline. Resources that aren't organized and accessible are worthless. If I can't find it, I can't share it. This theme will bring order to your acquisitions. I'll be interested to talk to Stephen about his kind of ordering of his acquisitions. Focus. This theme could help clarify goals and priorities, and that could help you decide what to keep and what to get rid of in terms of the resources you have. So both of those, discipline brings kind of order to the resources. I think focus helps to kind of maybe help decide which resources to kind of acquire or which ones to get rid of. So though that's my kind of opening thoughts here. So let's kind of jump into to Stephen. Stephen, just kind of introduce yourself to the audience here and say a little bit about what you do.
Well, I have to first of all say that my input really enjoyed that discursive that you just gave us on input.
There is a tape of this, so you can collect that. You can capture it.
I found it highly informative and helpful, so thank you very much, Kurt. So my name's Stephen Shields. I'm a senior consultant with Gallup. I've been with Gallup since 2008. Before that, I was a Gallup client working with Strengths with USA Today, and I was with USA Today for 20 years. And Strengths has really been a huge aha for me. Kurt, I'll tell you the moment when I realized that there was something to this. We started at USA Today working with engagement, not with strengths. And at the time, I didn't know that I had input number one, but I did. So I bought all the Gallup books. And one of the Gallup books I bought was Now Discover Your Strengths, and I got the code, went online, found out my top 5. They resonated with me. So I bought, at the time I was USA Today's National Subscriptions Manager. So I bought the book for my entire department, had them all get their top 5 and have them give it to me. And one of my analysts was very, very strong, but we would have odd conversations about 1% of the time. For example, we would be preparing reportage for executives for my corner of the company, which I had to do once a month. And she would come into my office with one of these reports, Kurt, and she would say, "This report is completely wrong. Stephen, this report is in 12-point Times New Roman font. Stephen, this should be in 16-point Arial font. These are middle-aged people that you're going to be talking to." And I'm like, where is all this passion coming from? Why are we talking about fonts? I mean, it just didn't make any sense to me. And then I found out she had belief in her top 5. And as I reflected upon her, everything that she did was incredibly passionate because she filtered everything through the core values of her own personal beliefs. So that's when I really saw the value of understanding someone else's talent configuration, because it gave you a bead not only on what they were good at, but what motivated them. So I've thoroughly enjoyed the work I've done with you and with others around strengths the last several years that I've been with Gallup.
Yeah, so that's almost. I mean, that little story. You see evidence of input in there. You're buying all the books, but also starting to see the utility of knowing this about myself, this information about myself, and this information about her. Can you tell me a little bit about the nature of stuff that you gather? Do you have like a specialty, or is there some kind of rhyme or reason to your acquisitions?
Yeah, I think you were quite correct earlier. You made a couple of statements about input that I also resonate with. One, that it often manifests informationally, and that definitely is how input manifests for me. It's primarily a matter of journals, of articles, and of books, anything that conveys information. The other thing that you said, and I don't know if you use this verbiage or not, but learner enjoys getting information for the sheer joy of the ingestion of it, right? So learner
experience.
Yeah, learner actually enjoys the experience. Input has a bit of an agenda. I often tell my clients that joy for me is when I'm giving a presentation and I remember some book that I read 6 years ago that's relevant to what I'm talking about right now. And that's like ding, 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 ding. That's like the ultimate joy, because the real reason that I read is to collect information to help other people later, to help my clients, to help my friends, sometimes to help myself. But I'm really looking for information that I can give some utility to, that has some direction to it.
How do you access that information? I mean, a book that you read 6 years ago, I mean, how do you access that?
Well, it's really funny, Kurt. I actually have a very bad memory, but if I teach something, or if it gets connected with my emotions, right? If it gets connected with my emotions, I never forget it. I'll remember it forever. But if it's just abstract information that has no emotional resonance with my values, then I don't really access it that much. So the computer has been my salvation, and Kindles have especially been my salvation because it's searchable, right? And I can put something, an article, a journal article, a book, I can put it somewhere and I can easily find what I'm thinking of by doing searches. So technology is enormously, in fact, I was just talking to a number of clients yesterday, and we were talking about how we have to be careful about how many books that we can buy. And the worst thing that ever happened to me, Kurt, was when I got my first Kindle, and to buy a book, all I had to do was that. That was awful. I was like dead.
Instantaneous and
I know.
painless.
The second worst thing that happened is Amazon.com a few months ago released a policy. If you ever bought, and it's not all publishers, but many publishers, if you ever bought a hard copy book, you could now go in and at a very discounted price you could get the Kindle version. And I'm like, I can't afford that. I can't afford the new books I want to buy, much less digitizing all the analog books that I've bought in the past.
It's one of the questions I was going to ask you is if you read primarily, digitally, or do you still read traditional books?
No, my relationship with books has radically changed since the advent of highly readable electronic means, first with the Kindle and now the newer iPads have really good granularity in the screens and you can easily read from them. And I walk into my home office and I look at all the books that I have, and I used to have an intense relationship with those hard copy books. They were very important to me, and I know some people in the digital age still very much have that feeling. I don't. My intense desire is to get every single one of those books off the shelves and into my Kindle. That's what I really want to do.
Then you have another room in your house.
That's right. Then I would have another room in my house. I mean, so
the storage of information has really changed dramatically. I mean, paper, files. You talked about articles, journals, books. Tell me a little bit about your practice of reading. When do you read? Where do you read? Do you have like a schedule?
Yeah, so my practice of reading, the thing that, no kidding, really changed my life for a few years with USA Today. I had an office in Maryland and an office also in Northern Virginia. And a few days a week I had to drive from Baltimore down to Northern Virginia, which is only 35 miles, but it's through D.C. traffic.
Yeah.
So I spent an enormous amount of time driving for those 3 years. So I discovered, and this will date me somewhat, I discovered audiobooks on cassette. And and my input just went crazy. And I started reading, mostly what you can get from libraries or history tomes. So I started reading tons of history and tons of biography. And that launched me on listening to audio books. And Kurt, that's actually the primary way that I read now is by audio books. So I'm a subscriber to audible.com. I get 2 books a month. I generally in a month I'll buy 3 extra books. And I get through so many books when I'm driving. I mean, yesterday was heaven for me. I had to drive 2 hours to Philadelphia and 3 hours back because of traffic. And it was 5 hours of reading. I just got to read during that whole time. So walking the dog, doing dishes, taking out the trash, whatever, I always have earbuds in and I'm always listening to books.
Stephen, do you ever find, sorry Kurt, one second, do you ever find in the car you wish for bad traffic so that you can finish?
Yes.
You're like, oh, traffic. Oh, great.
That's
I
right.
get the book, right? I mean,
that's right.
It really does. Listening in the car, recapturing that time, or even traveling, listening, getting that input while you're traveling changes the whole equation of travel, right? You don't look at it like I got to get there. Now the process, great. I've got 3 hours on the plane to consume this content. So.
Yeah. Now I will tell you, and this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I listen to things with a narrative. So like Freakonomics or Now Discover Your Strengths, I would never listen to that. That is actually what I do on a plane, and I travel quite a bit. About 80% of my time is on the road. When I'm in an airplane, I am reading my Kindle. But if it's history or if it's biography or if it's fiction, that's what I mostly listen to. If it's nonfiction prose, that's what I'm using my Kindle for, and that's primarily I'm doing that on the trainer in my house. But Kurt, in terms of what I read, it's usually prompted by something like a client that I'm working with or a new construct I need to learn. It's usually prompted by something external, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful to just hear about your practice. I mean, that was informative. I think you had a pretty sophisticated practice of reading here. You could describe that pretty well, and I think that's part of what I think valuable input is. Tell me a little bit about some of your earliest recollections of input. You didn't know that when you were talking to this, but what did this look like in a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to do in rural Virginia, where I was growing up, Danville, Virginia, Southern Virginia, no kidding, this will sound incredibly nerdy, but I loved to go into my room and I had the World Book Encyclopedia. And I would love just to read volume after volume of the World Book Encyclopedia. It's the ultimate in an input activity, right? Just gathering all that. And then a few years later, when I was in college, my parents bought me, and this is all pre-digital, right? They bought me the Encyclopedia Britannica. So now I had another level, and I would get new updated volumes every year from Britannica. So that was always a joyous occasion. But Kurt, when you asked me that question, one of the things that occurred to me when 30 years ago, my father and I had such a close relationship with hard copy books. My father and I built about 20 wooden boxes, and that enabled me to do two things. I remember coming home from college or coming home from graduate school, and I had a truck, and I would put 3 to 4 big wooden boxes. They were about yay by yay. I would put 3 or 4 wooden boxes of my sub-library that I was going to use when I would go home for vacation, because it was inexcusable and unthinkable that I would go somewhere without having a significant portion of my library with me. So that was my pre-Kindle.
I've heard of Meals on Wheels. This is Books on Wheels.
Books on Wheels. So when Beth and I started, I've been married for 23 years. When Beth and I started having kids, the second reason those boxes were so helpful is that I could reconfigure them depending on wherever I was living, and I would stack them. But when we started having kids, we realized that was dangerous, right? Because I would stack them, 10, 15 feet high, not 15, but 10, 12 feet high. And if the kids pulled down on them, they would come over. So now the boxes are permanently nailed to my home office so that I can't move them anymore, and they can't fall down.
And
so they've turned into shelves.
You haven't built any more recently either. Now you store all this stuff in this electronic device or in some cloud somewhere.
Well, in the last 30 years, I will confess to you, I totally did run out of boxes. So I had my wife surprise me one time when I came home from a trip. She had built tons of extra bookshelves in my home library, which is literally surrounded by books from floor to ceiling all around me.
Stephen, talk about how this theme has contributed to some personal or professional success. How does this add value?
Yeah, so I had
life to other people's lives.
I had a chance yesterday to do a strengths introduction, 3 hours with about 150 folks up in Pennsylvania, and I actually talked about this. I asked them to think about, and this is an exercise I do, which one talent of your top 5, which one talent is your go-to? Which one talent is the one that's going to make you the most successful in the next 2 years? And for me, when I look back, it's absolutely, Kurt, input. Because input allowed me, in my 20 years at USA Today, to start at customer service, then to get into technology, to become a data analyst, become an Oracle database administrator. It enabled me to move into marketing, to become a psychometric analyst for USA Today. Then it eventually allowed me to move into operations, and then in 2008 it allowed me to become a management consultant and to start working around strengths. And it's just the ability to be flexible informationally and to acquire new bodies of language has been critical for the progression of my particular career.
Yeah, I think when you use that phrase, bodies of language, I think words are another important part of input. I mean, it's another thing you have a pretty, I'd say, colorful vocabulary. And
colorful
I think
vocabulary usually means something else.
Yeah, I know it means something else. I don't have input. I don't have the you have a variegated vocabulary.
Oh, very good.
How's that? Yeah, I have to work at input here.
That's good.
When you were talking, I wonder if we've been talking about input and books. I wonder if input also has something to do with technology.
It absolutely does. I remember, it's not as much true now, but when computers were, my first computer was in 1986, and you couldn't wait from like 86 until, I don't know, 2000, 2005, you couldn't wait for the next computer to come out because you knew it was going to be so much faster and so much easier to use and faster internet, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would just long for that to come out. And a joyous day was when you bought a new computer and you had a day to set it up. Same thing with iPhone devices, iPads, Kindles. I think because you mentioned tools during your talk at the beginning. I think now it's going to be easier for me to get information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now
Yeah,
it's
and
easy
you are
to
kind
get
of on the,
information.
just following you on Facebook and stuff. I know you are kind of on the cutting edge. I also like the way you kind of distribute news. I mean,
Oh,
I think news, there's something about input and news that I think go together.
that's
Being able
true.
to kind of share news and breaking story. I mean, you are really good at sharing news about sharing. I know we're both have interest in photography,
Right.
and you introduced me to some of the different kind of photography apps that are on
Yeah.
phones, and so you are just a fount of knowledge about a lot of things.
Well, thank you, Kurt. Well, that's also where the maximizer works with the input, because with books, I'll get interested in a topic. I won't buy one book. I'll buy five. And then my activator, with its ADD spontaneity built into activator, I'll read three, and then I'll get interested in something else, and then I'll buy five books on that. But meanwhile, I've not read the other two books. So
So
same
you,
thing with iPhoneography, with my iPhone. I don't have three iPhone apps I use for photography. I literally have about 200. And it's because I'm collecting them. I'm collecting new apps of different ways I
they
can
all do
modify
different
pictures.
things. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
So it's not just, I think, and you said earlier, words. I do primarily think of informational means when I think about input, but it's definitely words. I mean, I love those word-a-day dictionaries. One of my greatest joys when I'm reading a nonfiction or a fiction book is when I stumble across a word I don't know, and now with the Kindle, you can. I sound like an advertisement for Kindle or Nook.
say,
You
tell me,
can.
I don't know what this is. Keep talking. I don't know
Well,
what
you can, when you see a word, all you have to do with a Kindle is put your finger on it, and you can get a definition of the word right there. You don't even have to look it up. And
Huh.
so then that becomes a word I can use, you know. So that's
That's
it's
amazing.
words. Yeah, it really is what the technology is enabling us to get information much easier than we used to be able to do in the past.
Stephen,
Yeah.
I've thrown up the graphic that you sent me earlier.
Oh yeah, those are the boxes. Yeah, those are the box. Those are some of the boxes. Dad and I made about 20, and those are now permanently nailed on my home office, and I'm surrounded by those in my home office. So yeah, those are the famous boxes I talked about.
We can't see the boxes unless the boxes talk, though, right, Jim?
No, well, I am showing them. I'm
Oh, there
showing
we
them
go.
to the audience.
Okay.
They're
Oh, they
seeing
can
them.
see
Oh,
it.
I
Yeah.
see. I see the boxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
So, do we have any questions out there, Jim, from the
We
audience?
do. Yeah. Let me stop sharing my screen here 1 second, and let me click over to those. Kurt, you caught me off guard. Usually I'm right on there, but I just
You were
I
showing
don't know.
You were
pictures.
playing with the
Pictures.
pictures. Yeah. That's good.
Kevin asked the question. He said, "I'd be curious to know how he uses input and maximizer together." Stephen, that's for you.
Yeah, so and what I was talking about earlier was actually the basement of Maximizer, which is I'll have a tendency to over-input beyond the utility of whatever it is that I'm inputting. So that's the basement of Maximizer, when I'm being perfectionistic about accumulating information. So your question, I imagine, is pointed more towards the balcony of the theme dynamic between Maximizer and input. So, and I'm going to think about my clients that I work with there. So when I'm reading, well, I'll give you an example. So I really enjoy Jim Collins' Built to Last, Good to Great. When I first read Built to Last when I was with USA Today, I kept several sets of notes at the same time. This is Maximizer. One set of notes were items of information I wanted for myself. One set of notes was for my church and the ways that this could help my church to be more effective. One set of notes was for some friends of mine who had a highly successful company that they had started, and I was thinking, boy, this book really applies to them. So my Maximizer wasn't just taking one set of notes, it was taking multiple set of notes simultaneously for different applications of that information for different organizations that I was involved in. So
Yeah,
that's an
that sounds a
example.
little bit like individualization too, which you have high,
Right. That's
which is
true.
high, where you're kind of customizing the use of this information for each kind of person, each audience to some degree.
That's right.
Are there some other themes that kind of interact regularly with your input? Other dominant themes that you have that?
Well, you were talking earlier about themes that balanced out input. You mentioned discipline as one that balances out input. Were there any others that you mentioned, or was that the main one you were thinking about?
I talked about focus and discipline.
Focus, right. So the one that works for me, there's a couple. Maximizer actually, when I'm in the balcony of Maximizer, does balance out input in terms of I have to do something with the input, but the one that helps me the most is Activator. So I can't just stay in books. I can't just stay in the conceptual and the ideological. At some point, I have to do something with this information. So and C.S. Lewis used to use a term, he used to talk about being pregnant with book, and I kind of get that way with information. There's a point where I'm like, okay, enough. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to practically operationalize this information so that it will either be beneficial to yourself or beneficial to someone else? So my activator really acts as a balancer for my input.
Yeah, you don't waste a lot of time reading because you do it when you're driving and when you're flying, which is a lot of time.
That's true.
So because some people are more what I would call passive readers.
That's true. That's true. That's absolutely true.
You're a pretty active reader. So,
yeah, but you're right. Actually, Kurt, about the only time I read is when I can't do much of anything else. That's really true.
Yeah.
Now, but fortunately, because of the lifestyle that you and I have, traveling all the time, we're dead in a airport waiting for a flight. We're dead on an airplane. Can't do anything else. So fortunately, in fact, it would be really interesting if I had a different kind of job. I probably would have to build in more time for reading.
Yeah.
I don't really feel a need to reading. I feel like I'm reading all the time, right?
You've got a perfect job for input with Activator.
I do. Well, one of the aspects about our job that some have struggled with, right, is how much time we are alone. Heaven for me is being caught at Jiffy Lube waiting for my oil to be changed because I get to read. Heaven for me is to be at the doctor's office and he's half an hour late because I get to read longer. Right? So I love being alone, I love being able to read.
That's my next construct to write. Heaven for a theme and hell for a theme.
Oh, that's really good.
You're going to write that one. You're going to write the input one. Heaven is being at the doctor's office and sorry the doctor's not here yet. You'll have a 45-minute wait.
That's right. I love that. Or even a flight delay. Yeah, I never get bored.
What other questions, Jim?
Kurt, let me ask you, Kevin, as a follow-up, had asked, is there more information? We talked about balconies and basements. We've mentioned that a couple times. Is there more information out there about that, or is that kind of part of our training?
It's obviously part of the training that we do, and most of our strengths trainings. I'm guessing there's probably some document somewhere that gives some interest in this, but it's really it's the balcony when it's productively applied. It's the basement when it's unproductively applied.
Yeah. That's right.
Or over-applied or misapplied.
We might have already started a document on our Facebook page. So if you go to facebook.com/groups/call-to-coach, that's the overarching name for what we do here with Theme Thursday. You have to ask me to get in. I'll let you in at that point. But we've got a whole set of documents out there. If somebody wants to start a balcony and basement document, if we don't have one, and we've done this before, write the 34 themes in and then start making comments. It's a great way for the group to interact as people see balconies and basements and even have conversations around them. So
people with input probably know where what's in those documents.
24 for me. I have no idea where they're at.
People with input know to use Google to find them.
That's right. That's right.
I will say, if you want to answer for yourself for your own top 5 to understand basements, here's the easy way to do it. How would it irritate people if I use this talent all the time? And if you can answer that question, then basically that's the basement for every single theme.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a lot about acquisition of stuff. I think there's also an awareness part of this. And so how do you stay aware of and maybe it's the same answer, is how are you exposed to stuff? What are the inputs almost? Are there certain sources of resource that you get?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of good resources. I subscribe to one of the, there are different ones out there, but they're basically all of them are executive book reviews. And you get these brief synopses of a multiplicity of books that the editors have decided that would be really good. And I usually do that for business, organizational development, and psychology and things like that. And that exposes you to a wide number of books, and then I can get the overall summary of them. And some books, that's really all you need is the overall summary. There are other books like our own Dr. Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. You want to get into the whole book itself. So that's a nice place. Honestly, Kurt, with the people I follow, and I'm very intentional about who I follow and who I don't, I get a lot of recommendations from my Facebook friends. I have about
Okay.
1,200 Facebook friends, and they're constantly talking about books. Because one of the things I do is collect. This is another thing. I collect friends.
There's a new thing.
I'll get another example of input. 2 nights ago, I was in a Mexican restaurant near where I used to work for USA Today, and I posted, "This brings back many memories," and then I tagged the 57 coworkers that I used to work with in that facility close to that restaurant. And it was joyful for me to go through all of my 1,200 friends and to find the 57 that used to work in that building. And I probably spent 20-25 minutes doing that. And it was fun for me because I was collecting.
Yeah. It's kind of sorting through the people in your life.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, another thing that I've heard that I sometimes use an example, because I think sometimes we limit the range of these themes, and so input can certainly be about books and informations and tools and people. I knew a person that had input, and the resource that they collected was money. They were a very philanthropic person, and what they really did is they used the resource of money, and they gave it philanthropically, and obviously it had great utility for the lives and foundations and organizations that they contributed to, but it was really what they collected. They saw the utility and the power of what this could do for needs or for issues.
Well, Kurt, that's a great point. You know, even with your own top 5, it's easy when you become very familiar with how that talent manifests in yourself. It's easy to then assume that that must be how it manifests in others. And I know you've had this experience. I've definitely had this experience where someone has described how they use one of your talents, and my first thought is, that's not that talent. You're wrong. And they're not wrong. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not realizing how they've adapted that talent. I would never think of input as applying to money, but now that you explain it, that makes perfect sense.
One of the places where I see input the most, I lead, just like you do, I lead lots of courses, and particularly these new coaching courses that we've created. They have unbelievable kind of resources and tools. It's really all of the best stuff that we've acquired in the last 15, 20 years of doing strengths coaching, and to see these people when they get these kits on their desk or the table, it's kind of like Christmas morning as they kind of dig in and looking at each piece, and these are pretty tangible things.
That's true. It's particularly the learners, the inputs, the analyticals, the intellections. They love that stuff.
So is there an example of where this input gets you in trouble occasionally, where it does hinder instead of help?
Absolutely. So occasionally within my work, I have to learn a new body of knowledge that I have never been exposed to before. And the classic mistake that I'll make is that instead of becoming competent in that body of knowledge so that I can help my particular client with that, my maximizer and my input combined, that I must become an expert in that knowledge.
The beginning of the learning curve is kind of a tough one.
Yeah. But I tell you, as a consultant, Kurt, something that I would say I'm still working on, because I have input and maximizer. When you hit a topic, what I want to do is to tell you everything I know about that topic. And what I've learned by hard experience is that while I might be fascinating to myself, I'm probably less fascinating to you.
Yeah, well,
so I have to really watch myself that I don't just tell everything that I've accumulated about a particular topic. I have to be highly intentional about that.
Well, you've shared just the right amount of information here with us in this call, so I really appreciate your willingness to be the face and voice of input. I think you've given us a great picture of what this can be, and not just what it can be, in your case, what it can do. And I really like the combination of input activator. This is somebody who doesn't spend all their time reading. They read in their spare time, so that when they hit the road, they're doing stuff. And I know that that's what you've done with the clients you've worked with. You just get great reviews and have great impact with everybody you work with. So we're honored here to have you share that part of you with us in the webcast.
I was honored to have been invited, and this was a ton of fun. Thank you both very much.
You bet, Stephen. You bet, Stephen. Great to have you. I'll remind folks there were a few questions we didn't get to, and if you're listening to this after the fact as well, of course you can't ask the questions if it's not live, and so we encourage you to go over to our Facebook group. So go facebook.com/groups/call-to-coach. Jump in there, and we'll get Stephen in there. He can answer your questions maybe out there on Facebook. Stephen, would you be willing to join us over there and do that? That'd be great. So we'll take it to Facebook at this point with your questions. Some great dialogue going over there, as well as if your input, some great resources are available in the Facebook group. We have a whole file section that you might want to peruse. There's some interesting stuff from Kurt and all kinds of great information that you might want to get downloaded or get access to. And so join about 3,200 folks over there. So if you like to collect people, you could collect with your friends over there in the Facebook group. We'll highlight that. I'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just go to GallupStrengthCenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. We'd love to have those as well, or any questions that you might have, even around our training. We mentioned that a couple times. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. There's also a contact form on the page you're on right now, most likely. If you're on our live page, you can fill that out, and somebody will get right back to you with that information. I mentioned it before, but you can catch the recorded audio and video for this program as well as past ones, including all the links to our Facebook group, our YouTube page, our iTunes links, our mobile apps that we have available. They're all available, coaching.gallup.com. We are making an effort to really, as we get bigger, get smaller, and so we're developing these meetup groups around the nation, here in the United States, and 3 globally now. So as we think about Singapore, India, and I think Hong Kong, I think we've got one there. It might be in a city near you. We're gathering strengths enthusiasts and coaches together on our meetup page. So go to coaching.gallup.com/meetups, or just find the meetup tab. I think we'll get you there. And find if one's in a city near you. If one isn't and you want to start one, let us know, and we'll help you get that going as well. And we'd love to see meetup groups in person all around the country, all around the world, and so we're super excited about that. And let's get those going as well. If you found this helpful, please, we ask you to share this with your friends, neighbors, relatives. Ship the URL around. We'd love to help get the word out about strengths, and so we'd ask you to share that as well. That'll do it for Theme Thursday. We're back in 2 weeks again. Kurt, do you remember what we're doing 2 weeks from now?
I think it may be belief.
Okay. Oh, that's my wife's number one. So
You'll want to tune in, Jim.
I will be listening as well. We want to say thanks for coming out tonight or today. Goodbye, everybody.